You are listening to First Metro Securities Philippine Stock Market Weekly podcast, where we feature timely and relevant discussions on the Philippine stock market and the economy in the hope of providing you investing and trading guidance. Here's your host.
Hi, investors. This is Anjz, and I'm back with another podcast. This time, I'll give you an update of what's been happening in the market. Just for context, today's recording date is March 16, 2026, Monday. Alright, let's dive right into it. Last week, the PSEI plunged 4.14% week-on-week to 6,058.94, down 261.47 points. The local bourse traded sharply lower for most of the week as risk sentiment deteriorated following escalating geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, which triggered broad sell-offs across regional markets. The index briefly slipped into the 6,000 range amid continued heightened concerns over potential oil supply disruptions and the implications of higher energy prices on global inflation and interest rate expectations. Sentiment remained weak as oil and gas prices continued to rise, raising concerns over further inflationary pressures and the potential for prolonged tighter monetary conditions. Investor confidence also stayed subdued as markets increasingly priced in the possibility of a longer-than-expected conflict, prompting risk-off behavior and continued sell-offs across global equities. Foreign investors ended the week as net sellers with outflows totaling 6.4 billion pesos. Over 2 weeks have passed since the Israel-US strike on Iran. Our guidance now is to sell into rallies as long as Brent crude sustains upward momentum in line with our current outlook. We continue to operate under Scenario 2, the quote-unquote transitory supply shock but with scars, projecting Brent at an average of $85 to $100 per barrel in the near term. Our concern is heightened as marine activity through the Strait of Hormuz remains severely constrained, and attacks on critical infrastructure and tankers have intensified. Should these disruptions persist, the risk profile escalates to Scenario 3, the quote-unquote prolonged disruption, logistics issue to full-scale supply shock, where Brent oil prices could spike to $100 to $150 per barrel. At those levels, demand destruction would ensue and result to broader economic disruption. As highlighted in our client briefing last Monday, March 9, 2026, the Philippines is especially vulnerable to oil price shocks. Duration and damage to critical infrastructure are pivotal. Should the situation persist, we anticipate weaker GDP growth for the first half of 2026, with the Philippines facing a heavier economic adjustment burden due to its high energy import-to-GDP ratios. In this potential adverse scenario, we expect Philippine equities to trend lower toward our bear case target of 5,500. This week, we expect the local bourse to trade sideways with a downward bias, as a conflict between the US and Iran remains unresolved, keeping global risk sentiment fragile. Tensions have escalated following reports that the US bombed a military base on Karg Island and threatened to destroy the island's oil facilities, which account for around 90% of Iran's oil exports. In response, Iran has signaled that it may only allow oil tankers that settle transactions in Chinese yuan, a payment arrangement that currently mirrors the structure used for Russian oil exports. On the commodities front, market participants expect oil prices to remain elevated, with Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate trading at $103.14 per barrel and $98.71 per barrel respectively. Reflecting these developments, the Department of Energy has projected minimum increases of 17.72 pesos per liter for diesel, 11.97 to 14.69 pesos per liter for gasoline, and 5.72 pesos per liter for kerosene, which may further fuel inflation concerns. Towards the middle of the week, investor focus will shift to the US interest rate decision, which could shape expectations on the policy trajectory of the Federal Reserve and whether rate cuts remain on the table, with the outcome also providing signals for the policy path of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and potentially influencing near-term market sentiment. If you're looking for more regular updates on the Middle East conflict, we do include them in our daily report, which clients can access for free on the platform. Simply go to the Research tab and look for the daily report to get a better read of the market. By the time this podcast gets uploaded, a few data releases would have already been released. You have U.S. industrial production year-on-year for Feb 2026 on Monday. Also, U.S. manufacturing production year-on-year for Feb 2026 on Monday as well. On Tuesday, there would be the PH cash remittances for Jan 2026. On Wednesday, you have US PPI for Feb 2026. US Fed interest rate decision on Thursday. Also on Thursday, Philippine budget balance for Jan 2026. And then on Thursday, there is the US initial jobless claims for March 2026. There are also a few PSEI briefings this week. SMC on Monday, DMCI on Tuesday, and DigiPlus on Wednesday. For investors looking to position amid this volatile environment, you can go ahead with a defensive playbook and go for dividend names. We have a weekly report called Dividend Dashboard. We release this every Monday wherein we feature names that will give you attractive yields, ideally higher than the Philippine 1-year bond yield. Each edition highlights top dividend picks with strong fundamentals and visible upside. There are also stocks on our watch list with yields not quite attractive just yet, and the high-yield names that may look attractive but carry risks. This week, for example, among our top dividend picks are LTG, MREIT, and AREIT, which will give you around 7% FY26F dividend yield. Again, that's Dividend Dashboard. You can find it under the Research tab and then go to other reports. Alright, that's it for today's episode. If you want more updated views, feel free to join our community. We're FirstMetroSecurities on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and FirstMetroSec on TikTok. Now, if there are any topics you'd like for us to cover, feel free to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, thanks for tuning in, everyone, and catch you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to First Metro Securities Philippine Stock Market Weekly podcast. Don't forget to follow us to get first dibs on our new episodes. For more up-to-date market news and info, exclusive content, and the opportunity to connect with your fellow Filipino investors and traders, join facebook.com/groups/FirstMetroSec and be part of the First MetroSec family.
The views and opinions expressed by the podcast creators, hosts, and guests do not necessarily reflect the official policy and position of Podcast Network Asia, the hosts of the program, or other programs of the network. Any content provided by the people on the podcast are of their own opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything.